everyone that's here. Again, I didn't have everyone here before, but really thank you, each one of you. You're the one that makes this school. I said it before. I thank each one of you, and then we're starting a new year, Be'ez Hashem. We need big siyata d'shmaya. We had it till now. Hashem gives us miracles, and it's la ye'umen that everybody's together. Everyone has their own ideas, their own opinions, and Be'ez Hashem, we had that siyata d'shmaya that the Eibishter puts it all together. And I'm not here to speak, but I'm going to introduce Rabbi Glatstein. And he's someone that he gives over his knowledge, and he gives over, and he inspires people, takes over from his parents, his grandparents, that when they came from the World War II, it was a very hard time for people, and they were inspired that the people shouldn't, it's a hard time, and we have it today also, and we need big inspiration, and Be'ez Hashem, He'll give over, and that we could start the year with a bang, and then we'll be inspired. Now the people in the back, he requested that you please take chairs and sit down. He doesn't want anyone standing in the back. He requested, before he speaks, he wants that you should sit down, find a seat. There's in the front, there's 2 of the seats, and then over here. There's a few chairs here if you want. Move them. Okay, Rabbi Daniel, siyata d'shmaya.
It's a great honor. It's really the honor of a lifetime to have the opportunity to meet you today, to share a message with this illustrious staff, true heroes. Heroes of the Jewish people, heroes of mankind. But perhaps this morning we could gain an even deeper appreciation and understanding for the great opportunity and the good fortune that you have to work in this school, to work with these precious children, to work with these holy neshamas. In Yiddishkeit and Judaism, we have a hierarchy of holiness, of Kedusha. So for us, the holiest spot on earth, of course, is the Beis HaMikdash. The temple in Jerusalem. The Medrash relates that in the year 70 of the Common Era, the Romans set siege on the city of Jerusalem and the Beis HaMikdash, and they surround the Beis HaMikdash. And as they're surrounding Yerushalayim and the Beis HaMikdash, they're apprehensive, they're a little bit nervous because they heard the stories of the severe repercussions that happened to anyone who dared enter the Beis HaMikdash and violated the sanctity of the Beis HaMikdash. So there's this guy over there, his name is Yosi Meshisa. He's a Jewish apostate, a rebel, a heretic. They say, Yosi, they figure they'll use him as a guinea pig. Yosi, you go in. And if you go in, we'll reward you handsomely. You take whatever you want. He said, okay, sounds like a good offer. So Yosi goes in and he has good taste. He takes the menorah. He takes the holy candelabra. And all the Roman officials are waiting for him outside, and they see he takes the candelabra. They say, Yosi, wow, boy, do you have good taste. Just do us a favor. Anything but that's reserved for the Roman governor. That's reserved for the emperor. Take anything else, just go in one more time. Take the ark. Take the shulchan. Take anything. Not the menorah. The menorah is reserved for the general. And Yosi says, no thanks. I'm not going to go in. They said, come on, just go in one more time. You ready? You went in once. Just go in one more time. You could take anything. We'll reward you handsomely. We'll give you money on top of that. We'll alleviate your taxes. Yosi says, no, I'm not doing it. They said, if you don't do it, you're going to be punished. We're going to torture you. Yosi says, so be it. They threaten to kill him. And they do. Yosi Meshisa, the great martyr who was once upon a time a rebel became the great martyr. He doesn't go in, he will not desecrate the temple. So the Panovich Rav asked, what happened to this guy? He was willing 5 minutes ago to go into the Beis HaMikdash, to take the menorah, to defile the sanctity. He went in the first time. Why didn't he go in the second time? What changed? So the Panovich Rav taught, one simple thing changed. He went into the temple, he went into the Beis HaMikdash, and he was infused with sanctity, and it changed his life. It was a life-altering experience. You see, when you would go into the Beis HaMikdash, the priests, the Kohanim, would go into the Beis HaMikdash literally barefoot, so that the sanctity of the ritzpah, the sanctity of the floor would infuse them with Kedusha. The holiest spot on earth was the Beis HaMikdash. If you would walk in, one person, you came out a different person. But friends, there's something holier in this world than the Beis HaMikdash. You know what that is? The Gemara tells us, Yikara hi mipninim. The Gemara speaks about Torah, those who learn Torah, the Torah itself, the place where Torah is studied. Yikara hi mipninim. It's even more precious than jewels. Yikara hi mikahen gadol hanichnas lefnai v'lefnim. You know that there's one spot on earth, the Holy of Holies, where the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, was only allowed to go in once a year, and even then he could only go in with the special incense. That's the holiest spot in the world. If a non-Kohen Gadol would go in, he would be costing his life. But the holiest spot on earth is the Holy of Holies, but there's something even holier than that. The place where Torah is studied, the study of Torah. The Torah itself is holier than the temple. But I want to share with you that there's actually one thing in this world even holier than the Torah. It's holier than the Beis HaMikdash. It's holier than the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKadoshim. It's holier than the Torah itself. Chassam Sofer teaches the one thing in this world that is holier than the Torah itself is the soul, the Jewish soul, the neshama. You see, the Zohar teaches that when God instilled our soul into us, the pasuk says, "Vayipach ba'apav nishmas chayim," that Hashem blew the soul into us. Says the Zohar HaKadosh, "Man dinafach midilei nafach." One who blows from within themselves. So if the Almighty blew our soul into us, just picture, if you will, the Almighty blowing the soul into us, man denafach, one who blows from within themselves. So the neshama is literally a piece of the divine. So if you have the privilege and the good fortune to spend your day in this holy school to help develop and cultivate and nurture and love and inspire Yiddish neshamas, Jewish souls. If you have the good fortune to work in Shai, to walk into this Beis HaMikdash every day, you have to understand this is literally holier than the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And that's an understatement. You have the privilege to interact not with the menorah, not with an aron, not with the Mizbeach HaKatoras. You have the privilege to interact with the holiest entities in the universe, Yiddish neshamas, Jewish souls. So I tip my hat to you. You have dedicated your lives really for the most noble career and the most noble task in the whole world. You know, Judaism always held up the education of children as the highest value. But you might be interested to know that it was not until about 125 years ago that the secular world came to the same realization. There's a woman by the name of Ellen Key, a Swedish author and educator who wrote a book in the year 1900. She lived from 1849 to 1926. She was a teacher dedicated to the welfare of children. And in 1900, she published a book, The Century of the Child. And she predicted, almost prophetically, that the 20th century would bring a revolution to the world, that the 20th century would become the century of the children. She wrote that in the 20th century, it would dawn on the nations of the world. They would begin to understand that the life of a nation and the future of a nation depends on the enlightenment of the children. Now, Key's prediction was almost prophecy. Not until the 20th century did compulsory education become the standard in the universal community. But besides that, a new attitude toward education developed throughout the world. You know, prior to the 20th century, education consisted of two primary ingredients: textbooks and discipline. Actually, I think when I was a kid, those also were the only ingredients in education. Textbooks and discipline. And if a child did not succeed, the child's considered irremediable. And then they invented a new approach that now education has to be catered to the particular needs and inclinations of a child. So today it's recognized, to educate a child, you need the cooperation of a father, a mother, a teacher, therapist, specialist, psychologist. But with the change in attitude towards education in general, there developed a change in attitude and a new approach to the education of physically and mentally handicapped children, developmentally delayed children, and I know here at Shai the more correct way to say it, for children with hidden intelligence. Until about 100 years ago, a handicapped child was considered beyond the scope of education. Today, you have schools for the blind, for the deaf, for the delayed, schools for children with hidden intelligence. But it's very important to point out that this was all in the secular world. But in the viewpoint of Yisrael Saba, in the viewpoint of Judaism, education, compulsory education, education for delayed children, education for handicapped children, this was not the century of education. The 20th century was not the century of the children. For the last 35 centuries, it has been the century of the children, of all children. You know, you could make the case. Why did the Almighty make a covenant with Avram Avinu? What was it about him? What was so special about him? Was it his belief? The Chumash doesn't say that. Was it his holiness? No, that's not what it says. The pasuk says, "Ki yadativ." Why do I love Abraham? L'man asher yitzaveh es banav es beisay achrav. Because he educates his children in an era where they didn't come up with compulsory education for another 3,500 years. You could make the case that the reason why we're the chosen nation is because we have chosen children's education from the beginning of time. You know, the most important night of the year, the night that we celebrate our identity, our freedom, our liberty, the night of Pesach, that night of the year is dedicated to what? Is dedicated to the education of our children. But you'd be surprised to spend a moment and let's identify which children we're trying to educate the night of the Seder. So of course you have the Chacham, you have the wise child, you have the Rasha, the wicked child, you have the Tam, a simple child, and you have what we call She'enoi Yodea Lishal. What in the world do you think a She'enoi Yodea Lishal is? You think it's someone who's 1 year old and is not mature enough to formulate a question? The She'ena Yodea Lishal is a developmentally delayed child. And we give it the same attention, we give him or her the same attention as the gifted child, the wicked child, or any other child. There is no neglect, there never was neglect for the She'ena Yodea Lishal. And even though it appears the child has no intelligence and doesn't even have the capacity to talk, the Haggadah teaches us that with patience and love and perseverance, you could literally open up the mouth of the child. You know, a number of years ago, a group of British psychologists performed a very interesting experiment. They took a number of adolescents whose physical and mental acuity ranged from above average to well below average. And they administered various series of testing and questioning and interrogation under normal circumstances, and they recorded the extent of these children's abilities. Next, under hypnosis, where they told the children, "You're physical weaklings, you're mentally incapacitated, you're mentally deficient," and they would repeat it again and again and again to the children, and then they would administer the same tests under hypnosis. And consistently, the physical strength of these children dropped 30%. The mental acuity of the children dropped 15%. Then the psychologists reversed course under hypnosis. And they told the children how bright they were, how strong they were, how beautiful they were, how talented they were. Not only did the scoring reverse course, but the children demonstrated 40% more physical ability and 20% more mental acuity. Where'd they get the strength from? Where'd they get the mental acumen from? You can't make someone stronger because you tell them they are. You can't make someone smarter because you say you're smart. The answer is, it didn't come from the testers, it came from the children. This means that every human being has deep reservoirs of strength and intelligence hidden within themselves. It is well known that there are distant regions in every human being's personality and persona, deep reservoirs of physical acuity, mental acumen, talent, capability, that is just waiting for someone to come along and access it and summon it and galvanize it. We all know that we live successfully by only scratching the surface of our mental acuity and physical strength. But that's for an average person. But for a child of hidden intelligence, for their vitality, for their continuity, for their success in this world, it is imperative that they are given the benefit of someone summoning all of the reservoir of ability and capability that lay dormant in their souls. So friends, if we were to break down education into two general groups, the first purpose of education is to provide maximum education for gifted and diligent students. That's one type of education. The second type of education, to provide minimum education for even the weakest and slowest in the community. So I want to share with you a very difficult question. Suppose, friends, you have a mother and father who have two children. One of the children is extremely gifted. One of them is extremely bright. And the other one is delayed. Say they're not able to devote themselves to the education of both children. Say they only have the bandwidth to educate one of these children. If they channel all their energy to the bright son, to the gifted child, they could transmit large amounts of Torah to this child. Tremendous material, tremendous worldly information. They could groom this child to be a great Torah scholar, very successful in any field. The only thing is, the other child may stagnate and deteriorate. On the other hand, if they devote themselves to the child of hidden intelligence, to the delayed child, they may be able to reinforce and galvanize a certain maximum potential from this child. Maybe they could teach the child Shema. Maybe they could teach the child basic prayers. Maybe they could teach the child to initiate conversation or a rudimentary mathematic. But then the gifted child may remain average or just slightly above average. Friends, which arena of education is more dear and more important and more valuable in the eyes of the Almighty, if we dare ask such a question? Which arena of education is more important? And I'll tell you the truth. When I was preparing for this talk, I was more apprehensive than any shiur I've ever given. This is not my area of expertise. This is not a topic I speak about with authority. I needed to do a lot of research. I needed to do a lot of preparation. And I went to the local Sfarim store where I live, on a planet called, you see, you live on the planet of Lakewood probably. I live on the planet of the 5 towns. I went to Central Avenue, and I don't want to say which Sfarim store I went to because the guy who works in the other one is going to be upset at me. And I went to a certain Sfarim store and I say, Pliny, I tell the guy, you have any books on special needs children? Any information for me? I need something, not run-of-the-mill, something inspiring. And somebody overheard my request to the store owner. He called me to the back of the store. You have to get nervous when somebody calls you to the back of the store. He says, Rabbi Glatstein, you're speaking about children with special needs. Did you know that Rav Aaron Soloveitchik gave a landmark drasha on this topic like 60 or 70 years ago? I said, no, I didn't know that. Tell me more. Yeah. I said, is it printed? He said, yeah, it's printed. I saw it 30 years ago. I said, where do you see it? I don't know, somewhere in my basement. I said, immediately go to your basement and please summon forth this drasha. Now, I don't even know his first name. I know his name is Mr. Golkowitz. So I gave him my email, and I was hoping and praying that I would hear back from Mr. Golkowitz. And sure enough, a few hours later, I received an email from Mr. Golkowitz with an epic essay from Rav Aaron Soloveitchik. Rav Aaron was the grandson of Reb Chaim. He was the first Talmud of Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner, and he was the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivas Brisk in Chicago. Rav Soloveitchik says that this question that we're asking, which priority of education is paramount? Maximum for the gifted or minimum for the delayed is a halachic question. And therefore we need to go to the halachic source. What does our Torah say about this? So he directs us to the Gemara in Eruvin. On Daf Nun Daled Amud Beis, the Gemara tells us about an Amoira, a Torah scholar, a teacher. His name was Rabbi Preda, who completely dedicated himself to the education of delayed children. Rabbi Preda had one particular student that was so severely delayed that what could be absorbed by a regular child with one simple explanation took this child 400 lessons to absorb the material. And one day Reb Preda taught the child 400 times and it didn't enter not one iota. And Reb Preda asked the child, what's the matter? What do I need to do now? I explained it to you 400 times. So the child said, listen, Rebbe, I overheard that you were thinking of leaving in middle, and I felt I didn't have your full attention, so I couldn't give it my all. So Reb Preda changed course. He said, here, I'm here for you. I'm not going to go to wherever I was going to go to. I will now focus solely on you. And Reb Preda sat and again taught the child another 400 times until it was fully absorbed by the Talmud. Whereupon a heavenly voice declared from Shamayim, Rabbi Preda, what would you like as your reward? Would you like to live another 400 years? Or would you and your entire generation like to go to the world to come? Reb Preda says, I'll take the world to come. The Almighty said, we'll give you both. Says Rav Soloveitchik, it's reasonable to assume that during that allocated time, that Rabbi Preda taught the student 400 times, he could have taught 400 gifted students, each one a different lesson. Why would Rabbi Preda allocate so much time for one severely delayed child? Says Rav Soloveitchik, we learn from this Gemara that providing a minimum education to the weakest in the community takes precedence, is more important, is paramount over teaching the most gifted and talented in our community. Now we all know this is not the prevailing attitude in any educational system. We know many scholars engaged in education are not inclined to devote their energy and resources to teaching the delayed. They greatly prefer to give, the that shiur, that class, that special program to the gifted, thinking that they're going to achieve much greater results by teaching the gifted. Says Rav Aaron Soloveitchik, it's a fundamental blunder. We learn from Reb Preda, it is more valuable in the eyes of Hashem to provide the minimum for the delayed rather than the maximum for the gifted. So you'll ask, why is that the case? And this is one of the most stunning ideas I've ever heard. Says Rav Aaron Soloveitchik, there's a law in the realm of physics that a chain is, the strength of a chain is only determined by its weakest link. The strength of a chain is only determined by its weakest link. A chain may have very strong links, but if one or two of the links are not strong enough to hold up that chain, then the chain has no strength at all. Says Rav Aaron Soloveitchik, what is true in the law of physics is true in the laws of the spirit, in the spiritual realm. Every individual in this world is part of a chain of the community that we live in. The Torah says, "Vayihi ha'adam lenefesh chaya," man became a speaking spirit. That means the role of every individual is not as a one alone individual. We're part of a community. We're part of a society. We're part of the Jewish people. We're part of the world at large. We're part of the chain of humanity. And by rehabilitating and helping bring out the hidden intelligence of, quote unquote, the weakest links, that is the best way to strengthen all of humanity. But in Judaism, we don't just believe that we're a horizontal link in the chain of humanity. We also believe we're a vertical link in the chain that goes back to our great ancestors and to Har Sinai, the chain of our people, the history of our people. And therefore the Jewish people's tradition and Masorah is only as strong as the education of the weakest in our community. The strength of the Jewish people will not be determined by the caliber of its Torah scholars. The strength of the Jewish people is not going to be determined by the strength of its Talmidei Chachamim. The strength of the Jewish people is determined by the education of children with hidden intelligence. And therefore, it is a deep honor to be here today to address a room that is full of literally the heroes of mankind and the heroes of the Jewish people, nothing more and nothing less. In 1989, a young boy was born. His name was Nata Shlomo. He was a child with Down syndrome. He was born to Rav Baruch Rabinowitz and his wife. Rav Baruch Rabinowitz was a menahel in Yeshivat Harvadas. The parents were driving to the hospital on a cold winter night, and the baby was born literally moments before midnight of New Year's. As the parents drove to the hospital that night, little did they know that on that dark Teves night, a period of darkness, or so they thought, descended upon their family. It began with problems during labor. There was a rushed forceps delivery under anesthesia. And then the reality of having a baby with Down syndrome threw them into a completely new reality. They found out at 10 days old, that the child had a major heart defect. He would need surgery, he would need medication, he would need specialists, and somehow the family was trying to rehabilitate some sense of normalcy to their own children. And then a few weeks later, they received a letter in the mail. A beautifully handwritten letter. Written by one of the greatest Jewish thinkers and Torah teachers of the last generation. A letter that has literally become a classic. It has become the Bible on the topic of children with hidden intelligence. This is a letter so extraordinary that Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky and the Vizhnitzer Rebbe both commented. Had they not known that this letter was written by Rav Moshe Shapiro, they would have thought it was written by a Rishain. It's a letter written, a letter of consolation written to parents, inspiration written to parents, but I believe it is no less relevant to teachers as well. It's dated Yerushalayim, Yud Gimel Shvat, 5750, 1990. To my dear Reb Baruch, shalom to you and your family. I'd like to share with you some heartfelt thoughts since the birth of your son, Nata Shlomo. I have believed that with Hashem's help, you will succeed in the challenge that was given to you. And if you do, you will have been presented with an incomparable gift. The child has within him the capability to accomplish something that nothing else in the world can do. To actualize, listen to these words, to actualize wondrous and powerful energy latent in the recesses of your heart. You know, Moshe Shapiro is writing about the actualization of the energy latent in the heart of parents, but it is no less applicable to the energy latent in the heart of teachers and therapists and assistants. But friends, here's the main point that I would like to share with you, that I believe every teacher and every employee here in Shai should review and think about and revisit every single day. Writes Rav Moshe Shapiro, primarily I want to focus on one point. Understand it, master it. If only all mankind would comprehend this. The significance of each, even indiscernible aspect of the human makeup. Each iota of progress, every achievement of Nata Shlomo with Hashem's help, every achievement that will increase his human dignity and increase his esteem, each additional bit of understanding, independence, cognitive skill, deductive reasoning, ability to draw a conclusion, to relate to his environment, is the equivalent of conquering an entire world. Anyone blessed with a little human intelligence should value every iota of achievement of these children as if they've conquered the entire world. You see, the Gemara teaches us that when the Almighty created the world, He created the world with many cows, many horses, many snakes, many giraffe, many fish, many dolphin, many eagles, many birds, and only one man. Why didn't God make a group of people? Or make a family? Why only one man? Says the Mishnah, Lefikach nivra ha'adam yechidi, therefore man was created on his own. Kadesha kol echad v'echad yachal loymar, so that every individual human can say, Bishvili Nivra ha'olam, the world was created for me. Which means a gifted child could say, the whole world was created for me. A talented child could say, the world was created for me. A bright child could say, the world was created for me. A handicapped child could say, the whole world is for me. A delayed child could say, the world is for me. And we could say about every single child with hidden intelligence, the entire world is for them. And therefore each little achievement they made, you've conquered a world. Every small step they take is the greatest achievement in history. If a child could turn over, which requires 38 different muscle movements, it's the achievement of history. If a child could initiate a conversation, it's a revolution in the world. This is one of the most important perspectives to take. The one child that you're teaching, that you're instructing, that you're guiding is the entire universe. And then Rav Moshe Shapiro uncovers the spiritual greatness and stature of these holy children. In general, Rav Moshe Shapiro says, every soul is sent down to this world for a purpose. And in general, the purpose that a human being has is to perfect themselves. But some people are sent down to this world and they don't have the ability to perfect themselves. So then we have to understand their existence in a completely different way. They must already have been perfected, says Moshe Shapiro, and they're here to help others perfect themselves. They must have such great and grand stature that they're here for the benefit of others, a level, a plateau that is reserved for these holy souls. You know, Rabbi Menachem Nissel wrote a biography on Moshe Shapiro. It's called Looking into the Sun. So he recounts that when his daughter and son-in-law had their first child, they had a quandary, they had a dilemma, because the great-grandmother had recently passed away, and this was a perfect opportunity to name the baby after the great-grandmother. The problem was, and the reason for pause, was the newborn baby had Down syndrome, and they felt maybe this would not be the best opportunity to name the child after the great-grandmother. Maybe wait for a completely healthy child to name after the great-grandmother. So they brought the question to Rav Moshe Shapiro, and he responded unequivocally, Revach Naki. It's straight up gain. Nothing could be better for the departed soul of the great-grandmother than to have the privilege, to have the zechus, to have such a holy neshama bear her name. This is the greatest tribute to the soul of the great-grandmother. You know, Rav Moshe tried to explain the concept of the spiritual stature of these children of hidden intelligence with the following analogy. You ever hear of Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu? He's the greatest man who ever lived. He brought the Torah down from heaven. He split the sea. He took us out of Egypt. But the man had a problem. He had a handicap. He couldn't talk. He was kvad peh, kvad lashon. He did not speak clearly. Why didn't he speak clearly? So to understand this, you have to understand the philosophical glue that holds together the body and the soul. You see, all human beings consist of two parts. We have a body, the physical part of us. We have the soul, the spirit. The thing is, the body and the soul are antithetical to each other. They're polar opposites. How in the world can the body and soul stick together? You have any idea? What's the scotch tape? What's the glue? What's the silly putty that God uses to hold the body and the soul together? And each one by themselves is inoperable. You know, a body without a soul is a corpse. A soul without a body has no way to function in this world. So what in the world holds together the body and the soul? Maral says, Vayivra Elokim es ha'adam, God created man's body. Okay. Vayipach bi'apav nishmas chayim, He instilled the soul. Okay. Vayihi ha'adam lenefesh chaya, man became a living being. Targum says the faculty of speech. The faculty of speech is the point of fusion between body and soul. What holds the body and the soul together is the faculty of speech. The faculty of speech is called the makeh bepatish, the final touch on man. Without the faculty of speech, body and soul cannot fuse together. You know, it's our tradition that as soon as a child is born, the angel comes, taps it on the lip. What that means is the final touch of man is the ability for man to speak. It's the faculty of speech that holds together the body and soul. By the way, it just gives insight to the great teaching of the Chafetz Chaim, why life is more dependent on anything than our speech. Why we have to guard our speech so carefully. Because our speech is literally the glue that holds us together in this world. But if you're not careful in the words you say, one is jeopardizing the whole arrangement between body and soul. But Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't able to speak. That's right. His soul was so lofty, it was incapable of fusing together with his body. And that was reflected in a developmental delay of his faculty of speech. So says Rav Moshe Shapiro, often the sanctity of the soul can be reflected in the physical challenges that children experience in this world. So I mentioned I live in the 5 towns. There's a friend of mine, an acquaintance of mine, Rav David Cohen, who's a rabbi in North Woodmere, who had a son, Yedidya, a child with Down syndrome. And Rav David had studied Rav Moshe Shapiro's letter, and he was very moved by Rav Moshe's sensitivity towards children with Down syndrome. And when it came time for his own son, Bris Milah, and he was looking for the sandak, the one who holds the child at the bris, he said, it has to be Rav Moshe Shapiro. And Rabbi Cohen recorded two events that happened at the bris that really stand out in his mind. The first one was that when Rav Moshe came into the room at the bris, he embraced him with such a warm hug, and he told him, David, I promise you, this child is going to be a typical child. And then the other thing that stood out was when you give the kid a bracha at the bris, and you say, Zeh HaKatan Gadol Yeh, this little child will be very great. Rav Moshe made sure to accent and to highlight, Zeh HaKatan Gadol Yeh. And sure enough, a little while later, Rav David went to visit Rav Moshe Shapiro, and he pulled out a picture of his kid, Yedidya, and Rav Moshe looks at the picture and he says, looks like a typical child. And this kid had a Rebbe, an amazing Rebbe, Rabbi Shua Fulda, who would share that this boy, when you would ask him a question in class, he always knew the answer, but he would playfully, intentionally answer incorrectly to showcase that he has a sense of humor, and to showcase he has deductive reasoning and he could figure out to say the wrong answer. And indeed, in many ways, his parents said, the bracha of Moshe Shapiro came true, that in many ways, he's a typical child. But the parents always emphasize the importance of the great teaching of Moshe Shapiro. How every iota of progress of a child is literally capturing the entire world. If I could share with you just one final perspective about all of our children, especially children with hidden intelligence. The first kid who was ever born was a disaster. Cain. He was jealous, he was angry, he murdered his brother. I don't understand. His father is Adam, his father is Yitzir Kapav Shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he's the handiwork of the Almighty, and the kid was a murderer. What caused him to murder? Says Rav Shamshin Rafal Hirsch, Rav Shamshin identifies that the corruption of Cain was rooted in his name. When he was born, Eve said, Kanisi ish es Hashem. I acquired a child with God. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that is that a child is not a kinyan. A child is not an acquisition. You don't own children. You don't own other people's children. You don't own your own children. You don't own children. Children are not possessions. They're not things. You don't have them. You guard them. They're a pikadain. They're given to you to safekeep. They're given to you to groom, to elevate, to raise, to nurture their ability. They're not yours. You don't own them. You don't have them. You take care of them on behalf of the Almighty. We are all awaiting the imminent arrival of Mashiach. And just as when Hashem gave us the Torah on Har Sinai, it came along with national healing for all of Jewish people. All the handicapped were cured. All the ill were healed. You could be sure that when Mashiach comes, it will pave the way for all sickness to be cured. And when Mashiach comes, says Rav Moshe Shapiro, Mashiach will initiate a great dance. There'll be a big dance. And at this dance, the first dance will go to the tzaddikim, the righteous. But the true tzaddikim, the really righteous, the holiest in our community. And we're going to discover that it's a tipsy-turvy world, it's an upside-down world. Who you think is righteous, Mashiach will reveal, they weren't as righteous as you thought, and who you thought were simple and pedestrian were much holier than you thought. But the first dance, says Rav Moshe Shapiro, is going to go for those children who already reached their tikkun, who already came to the world, rectified. The first dance is going to go to those children whose role in this world is to generate chesed around them. The first dance will go to the children with hidden intelligence. And as these children are dancing with Mashiach, something will be wrong. They're going to turn to Mashiach and they're going to say, Melech HaMashiach, where are our parents? We're only here today because of the love and devotion of our parents. It's not right that we should be in the middle of the circle and our parents are mere spectators. And Mashiach will say, Kinderlach, you're right. And Mashiach will signal to the parents of children with hidden intelligence to join the first dance when Mashiach comes. But I think we can humbly add that these children are going to make one more request. They're going to say, Melech HaMashiach, we could not be who we are today without our teachers, without our therapists, without our assistants, without our mentors. They've given us the skills to maximize our potential. They can't be mere spectators. And Mashiach will gladly agree and summon to all the teachers and all the therapists and all the mentors to join that first dance in an explosion of sheer, unmitigated joy when Mashiach comes. The first dance will go to the children of hidden intelligence. It will go to their parents. And the first dance will also go to the entire staff here at Shai, who will join the joyous circle as soon as Mashiach comes. May that day come speedily in our times. God bless all of you. Shefa, bracha, v'atzlacha. Thank you so much.